Imagine being 80 years old and looking back at your life, only to realize that your biggest regret isn't something you did. It's something you never tried because fear held you back. That's a thought that can shake anyone awake, right? Tony Robbins says, "The quality of your life is the quality of your decisions." Those decisions, the bold ones, are often the difference between living fully and living with regret. But fear has this sneaky way of whispering doubts into our ears, telling us to stay safe, to not risk embarrassment or failure. And Sinek reminds us that the fear we feel grows louder when we don't know our why. When we lose sight of why we're here, fear fills that gap, making us second-guess ourselves. Today, we're diving into something powerful, how fear works in our brains and how we can flip it into courage. Because the truth is, fear isn't always the enemy. It's sometimes a compass pointing us toward what matters most. We'll look at how science explains fear and how spirituality gives us tools to face it. And we're not talking theory. We're talking real-life stories of people who stared fear in the face and chose to live boldly anyway. By the end of this video, you'll hear stories about Michael Jordan, who turned rejection into fuel, and Serena Williams, who fought her way back from injury when fear threatened her career. You'll see how Howard Schultz battled stage fright before creating Starbucks, and how Walt Disney and Steve Jobs rose after failures that would have crushed most people. We'll also talk about legends like David Goggins, Jeff Bezos, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Tom Brady, who didn't let fear decide their futures. And we'll explore how people like Stephen King, Nelson Mandela, Amelia Earhart, Kobe Bryant, and Bruce Springsteen chose to live all in, leaving legacies that still inspire millions. So stick with us, because today isn't just about talking motivation, it's about giving you tools to break free from fear's grip. And who knows? Maybe a few words from Tony Robbins or Sinek will be the spark you need to start living all in. Stay until the end, and pick at least one insight to try out in your own life today. You might discover that your fear isn't there to stop you. It's there to show you the way forward. Did you know your brain reacts to the fear of public speaking in the same way it reacts if a lion is running straight at you? That's how powerful fear is. It's not just some feeling in your chest. It's a full-on alarm system firing inside your brain. Tony Robbins says, fear is imagination undirected. Think about that. Most of the time, what we fear hasn't even happened. It's a movie playing in our heads, showing the worst possible scenes. Yet, our heart races as if it's real. We sweat, our stomach turns, and we freeze up. That's because the brain can't always tell the difference between real danger and imagined danger. Sinek explains that people lose themselves when they forget their why. When we have no purpose, fear gets louder. It fills that empty space where our purpose should live. And once fear takes over, it can keep us stuck in jobs we hate, relationships that drain us, and lives that feel half-lived. Andrew Huberman, the neuroscientist, says this happens because of a small part of our brain called the amygdala. It lights up when we sense threat, even if the threat is just embarrassment, rejection, or failure. To our brain, social humiliation can feel as deadly as a lion chasing us. That's why speaking in public or asking for promotion can feel so terrifying. Brené Brown, who has spent years studying courage and vulnerability, says fear and shame are best friends. When we feel shame, like we're not enough, it feeds our fear. It whispers that if we try, we'll fail. That if people really see us, they won't like who we are. So we stay quiet, small, and safe. But let's look at how real people turned fear into fuel. Take Michael Jordan. As a teenager, he got cut from his high school basketball team. That moment crushed him. He could have let the fear of not being good enough keep him off the court forever. But instead, he used it as fire. He practiced more than anyone else and eventually became one of the greatest athletes of all time. That's fear transformed into greatness. Then there's Serena Williams. After a serious injury, she admitted to being terrified she'd never compete at the same level again. She faced doubts and physical pain. Yet, she didn't let fear decide her story. She came back, winning Grand Slams, showing the world that fear doesn't get the final say. Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, used to panic at the thought of speaking in public. Imagine the guy who built a coffee empire, afraid to stand in front of people and talk. But he faced it one speech at a time. Today, he's one of the most recognized leaders in business, proving that fear can be trained away. Walt Disney was once fired from a newspaper because his boss thought he lacked creativity. Seriously, Walt Disney. Imagine the fear of being told you're not good enough to do what you love. But instead of giving up, he built an empire of imagination. And Steve Jobs? He was kicked out of Apple, the company he created. He was devastated and embarrassed. He could have hidden away, afraid to try again. But he didn't. He founded new companies, kept innovating, and eventually returned to Apple to create products that changed the world. Tony Robbins always says that what shapes our lives isn't what happens to us, but what we decide to do about it. For these people, fear showed up loud and ugly, but they decided it wouldn't control their future. Even Tony admits he was terrified of public speaking when he started. Can you picture that huge, booming voice shaking with nerves? Kind of funny, right? But he stepped up anyway, and look where he is now. Here's a small exercise for you. Grab a piece of paper and write down one fear you have right now. Then ask yourself, is this fear about physical danger, like real harm, or is it just something my mind has created? Is it imagination running wild? Fear doesn't always mean stop. Sometimes it's pointing us exactly where we need to go. So far, we've learned that fear comes from deep in our brain, but also grows when we lose sight of our purpose. In the next chapter, we'll see how to turn that fear into action that changes everything. Here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. Courage doesn't mean you don't feel fear. It means you take action even while your heart's pounding, your hands are shaking, and your stomach's flipping like a roller coaster. Tony Robbins says, massive action breaks fear. He believes the fastest way to silence fear is to move, to do something. Because standing still gives fear the power to grow bigger in your mind. When you take action, even if it's small, you start changing the story fear has been telling you. Sinek adds, clarity fuels courage. When you know exactly why you're doing something, it's like shining a flashlight into a dark room. The monsters hiding in the corners shrink away because purpose makes things less scary. James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, explains that courage often isn't a giant leap. It's a tiny step repeated every day. It's deciding to speak up in a meeting once, or write one page of a book, or run for 5 minutes. Those tiny steps add up and build confidence. The same way a brick becomes a wall. Jay Shetty talks about spirituality as a tool, not as an escape. He says meditation isn't just about feeling calm. It's training your mind to stay present when fear screams at you to run. It's learning to breathe through discomfort instead of hiding from it. Let's look at how this all works in real life. David Goggins is a man who faced fear head-on. He was overweight, working dead-end jobs, and feeling stuck. One day, he looked in the mirror and decided he couldn't live like that anymore. He started running. At first, he could barely go a mile without collapsing. But he kept going. He joined the Navy SEALs, one of the toughest groups on the planet. Now he's known for pushing past pain and fear, teaching that we all have a calloused mind waiting to be built if we just do the work. Then there's Jeff Bezos. He had a safe job on Wall Street, making good money. But he couldn't shake this idea that the internet was going to change everything. Leaving a secure career was terrifying. He worried about failing and embarrassing himself. Yet he chose to act. He started Amazon in a garage. Today, it's one of the biggest companies in the world because he refused to let fear decide his future. Arnold Schwarzenegger came to America without speaking English. People told him he'd never succeed because of his accent and weird name. But he took action anyway. He lifted weights, auditioned for movies, and learned the language one day at a time. He built a life across sports, film, and even politics. Arnold shows that action can silence the voices saying, "You'll never make it." And Tom Brady? Here's a fun fact. During the NFL draft, almost no one wanted him. He was picked 199th overall. Coaches thought he was too slow and not athletic enough. Have you seen the photo of Tom at the draft combine? He looked more like a college student on spring break than a future champion. Kind of funny, right? But Tom didn't listen to doubt. He kept working, proving that tiny, consistent actions can turn into a legendary career. Tony Robbins teaches that we can't wait for confidence to show up first. Confidence is built by doing the thing we're afraid of over and over. Sinek says that purpose is the strongest fuel for action. When we connect to our why, we find courage we didn't know existed. So here's a question for you. If fear wasn't in the way, what's the boldest action you'd take this week? Would you speak up at work? Start that side hustle. Tell someone how you really feel. Grab a notebook and write it down right now. Don't wait for courage to magically appear. Courage grows with action, one brick at a time. Remember, the people we just talked about didn't feel fearless. They felt terrified, but they moved forward anyway. And that's how fear loses its grip. So far, we've discovered how fear can be turned into movement. Next, we're going to explore how living all in can help you live a life without regrets. Imagine looking back on your life and realizing you didn't hold back. You took risks, spoke your truth, chased your dreams, and loved without fear. That's what living all in really means. It's the ultimate freedom, a life without what-ifs. Tony Robbins says, "The only impossible journey is the one you never begin." He believes that the worst pain isn't failing. It's living half-hearted and wondering what could have been. So many people are stuck on the sidelines, afraid to step onto the field of their own lives. Sinek adds, "Legacy is not leaving something for people. It's leaving something in people." When we live all in, we leave pieces of ourselves, our courage, kindness, and ideas, in everyone we touch. That's how ordinary people create extraordinary impact. Robin Sharma talks about leadership without a title. He believes every person can be a leader, not because of a position, but because of how they choose to show up. Living all in is about owning your life, even if no one's watching. David Goggins has a saying, "You have to callous your mind." It means you train your brain to handle discomfort, rejection, and pain. Living all in isn't easy. It means facing fear daily. But Goggins proves that the mind can be trained like a muscle. And the payoff is freedom. Look at Stephen King. Early in his career, he threw the manuscript for Carrie into the trash. He was sure no one would want to read about a girl with strange powers. His wife, Tabitha, pulled it out and convinced him to keep going. Stephen was terrified of failing, but he pushed through, and Carrie became his first bestseller, launching one of the biggest writing careers ever. Then there's Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in prison, facing fear most of us can't imagine. When he was finally released, he chose forgiveness over revenge. He decided to live all in for something bigger than himself, freedom and equality for his country. Amelia Earhart broke barriers as the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. People told her it was too dangerous, that she should stay safe. But she refused to live small. Her courage inspired countless others to challenge the limits set around them. Kobe Bryant is another example. People talk about his talent, but what truly set him apart was his work ethic. Kobe practiced at dawn, watched game film for hours, and demanded excellence from himself. He lived all in because he couldn't accept anything less than his best. And Bruce Springsteen, the boss, has talked openly about battling anxiety and depression. Even while performing for thousands, he sometimes felt like an outsider. Yet he poured his heart into music, telling stories that connected with millions. Bruce shows that living all in doesn't mean you're fearless, it means you're real. Tony Robbins teaches that living all in isn't about being reckless. It's about making the decision that fear won't keep you small. It's knowing you'll have scars, but those scars mean you showed up for your own life. Sinek reminds us that our why becomes our compass. When you're connected to your purpose, even the biggest fears lose power. So here's something powerful for you to try. Picture yourself at 80 years old, looking back at your life. What do you hope your older self says? Are there chances you wish you'd taken? Words you wish you'd spoken? Write a letter from your future self to the person you are today. Tell yourself to live all in. Here's the truth. Fear doesn't disappear. It walks beside us every day. But the people who change the world are the ones who refuse to let fear make their decisions. In our journey today, we've seen that fear comes from the brain, grows in silence, and shrinks when we take action. And the ultimate victory is choosing to live all in, so we reach the end of our lives with pride instead of regret. Because the only real failure is never trying at all. Fear is never going to completely vanish from our lives. It's wired into us. It's part of how we survive for thousands of years. But as Tony Robbins says, the quality of your life is the quality of your decisions. And those decisions include whether we let fear drive our lives, or whether we learn to drive through fear toward the things that truly matter. Today, we learn that fear isn't just some feeling to ignore or pretend away. It's often imagination running wild, as Tony puts it. And Sinek taught us that when we lose our why, fear rushes in to fill the empty space. That's why reconnecting with your purpose can quiet those voices that tell you to stay small. We've seen how fear comes from deep in the brain, like Andrew Huberman explained, with the amygdala lighting up even when the danger is just embarrassment instead of physical harm. Brené Brown reminded us that shame and fear often walk side by side, keeping us from showing up as our true selves. And we looked at real people who felt fear just like us, but chose to keep moving. Michael Jordan, cut from his high school team, turned rejection into fuel. Serena Williams fought her way back from injury. Howard Schultz faced his fear of speaking to lead Starbucks. Walt Disney and Steve Jobs bounced back from massive failures. David Goggins proved that the mind can be callous to push through pain. Jeff Bezos left a safe career to follow an idea. Arnold Schwarzenegger built a new life despite language barriers. Tom Brady turned being overlooked into motivation for greatness. Stephen King nearly gave up on his writing. Nelson Mandela sacrificed his freedom for justice. Amelia Earhart refused to live small. Kobe Bryant demanded excellence every day. And Bruce Springsteen shared his truth with millions despite his inner battles. Tony Robbins always says, "The only impossible journey is the one you never begin." It's a reminder that living all in doesn't mean you won't fall. It means you'll get back up again and again. Simon Sinek shows us that when we live connected to our purpose, our legacy isn't just what we leave behind. It's what we build in people's hearts while we're here. So here's a final thought for you. Don't wait for fear to disappear. It probably won't. Instead, let it become your signal that something important is waiting on the other side. Take even one step toward what scares you. If you're looking for more ways to conquer fear and live boldly, check out books like Start With Why by Simon Sinek or Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. Sometimes the spark you need is waiting in the pages of a single chapter. And if you found value here today, consider giving this video a like or subscribing. Not because you have to, but because you're choosing to live all in. And that starts with one small decision. Here's to living boldly, my friend. Let's not half-ass our lives. Let's go all in.
Hey, incredible growth seekers. Wow, what a journey. If this video resonated, subscribe now for more life-changing content. Join our community of self-improvers. Smash that like button to fuel more content on mindfulness, goal setting, and emotional intelligence. Share this video to create a ripple of positive change. Comment below about your growth journey. Your insights shape our content. Next week, boosting self-confidence and overcoming limiting beliefs. Don't miss it. Every interaction brings us closer to a world of empowered individuals. Let's make personal development global. Stay inspired, keep growing. Your best self awaits. Let's unlock it together.